We have Channing Harris today with Etheridge Counseling Group here to talk to us about holidays, family traditions, new and old. Channing, thanks so much for being here to talk to us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So holidays are a hectic time, which I think is it's just the perfect time for this four-part article series that you wrote to come out and for us to be talking about this. I think a lot of the time, self included, we can really get caught up in the chaos of everything that's going on, getting all the shopping done in time, managing our triggers, all of this, and maybe kind of lose sense of what's important to us. So, talk to us a little bit about traditions and why you chose to kind of bring this into this four-part series that you wrote.
Yeah, I think specifically when we think about the holidays, it is rich with traditions. Each family has their own, it looks different across the board, but we all have ways that we kind of honor the holidays with each coming year, you know, and in a lot of ways, they can connect us to generations past and this idea of being able to connect with generations moving forward as
Mm,
well.
mm,
And so it can have really, meaningful and close to home implications because of that. And so I think it's important when talking about the holidays to talk about traditions and talk about the ways that we hope to celebrate and to honor, because each year they do look a little different. While there can be similar aspects every year our family changes, our life changes, the landscape of our life is different. And so how we, specifically honor those traditions can look different. And sometimes that can be a hard struggle in and of itself.
So having that like flexibility is what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. And
So,
kind of being able to bridge like the old with the present with the future.
mm,
How do we want to mesh what kind of has been handed down to us from past generations with our current generation? And then also, how do we want to pass the torch? What do we want to pass on when we're, long gone? What do we hope our
mm,
future generations
mm,
are
mhm.
doing, and
So
how are they on?
how would you go about maybe starting a new family tradition? What are there some guidelines that you have for how to even go about doing something like that?
Yeah, I think if we think about the core of traditions is honoring something that's important to us. And so reflecting on what are your core values, and not just individually, but if we think about traditions, not always, sometimes we do them individually, but a lot of the times we're doing them in connection with other people. So
Mm,
gathering, our family, the people that are close to us, talking about what do we value? What do we want to emphasize during the holidays? Things like gratitude, togetherness, service to others. Use these values as a foundation for what do we want this new tradition, this new ritual to look like.
So really kind of pondering in a mindful way, reflecting on what your values are and getting creative and coming up with something that incorporates those things. Um, when you think about honoring old traditions, what might that look like?
I think it's really important when we think about kind of, to me, that's the past, past generations. And sometimes that may even be people who have passed. And
Mm,
so, again, there's lots of emotional weight in that. And so, sharing the memories of those times, those people, the emotions associated with that,
mm,
that can be really fulfilling. And
mm,
even like
mm,
symbolic gestures. So we can share the memories and we can do a symbolic gesture, even if the tradition is no longer.
mm,
Because some traditions are tied to, it can feel that they're tied to a particular person. And when that person's no longer available or they've passed, it can be really, hard to grapple with that.
mm,
But
mm.
there's ways that we can symbolically still celebrate that.
Sure.
That
I'm thinking about even in my own family, my I think it was my dad's grandmother was sort of known for these big dinners, right? She'd prepare this, she'd be cooking all day, right? And no one has sort of taken that torch to do those dinners, but every year my dad and his brother talk about it. And so that's kind of what came to my mind is, okay, the tradition is no longer, but there's that symbolic gesture of sharing the memory, talking about these dinners. Um, and so that the memory has been passed down, even though the tradition itself hasn't been. And I love this idea of like lighting a candle, maybe for people who have passed or no longer with us, bringing out some photos and lighting a candle so that you're sort of still incorporating their memory. I love that. I love that idea. And I know in your article you mentioned like adapt and modify. Like
Mhm.
that's okay. That's part of tradition too, is like this changing over time. Uh,
Yeah.
what are
And I
some?
think, even, sorry, I just wanted to
Yeah,
point this
yeah,
out.
yeah, go
Even
ahead.
like think about when we think about adapt and modify, that our traditions now are going to look very different than traditions in the 1900s. Now we have things like technology, so we might not be able to sit in the same room together because we might be spread out across the country or even across the world. But
Mhm.
we have technology now, we can adapt, and maybe we can do something virtually, or even maybe that's just sending short videos in a family group chat. It
Yeah.
looks different, but it's still a beautiful way to honor that.
Yes. Yes, indeed. What are some other opportunities for deeper connection over the holidays?
I think about like experiential traditions, trying to
Mhm.
do activities, shared experiences together. And sometimes that can be another great way to create new ones. Sometimes it's the old ones doing the same activity, but also is there a new activity that we can do that is, have we moved and we don't have access to the same activities, but there's a new one that we could still share together. And, collaborative decision making involving every family member about, how do you want to celebrate this holiday season, and
Mhm.
making time for, it doesn't all have to be in the same moment, making time throughout the holiday season to maybe incorporate some of the different ideas where everyone feels involved. And then
Mhm.
I would say like reflecting as a family overall. A lot of times it sounds funny, but we don't often take time to sit down in the holidays and just reflect. Or even after the holidays, we feel so burned out. We're like, oh, it's over with and done. On to the next. But
Yeah.
taking a few moments to just even reflect about the highs and the lows and the goods and the bads.
Yeah. 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 And I love what you said there of like incorporate everyone, and even I think too really important to incorporate children and letting them feel the importance they have a voice too and what's important to them because in the end they will be carrying the torch of tradition, down the road. So that's sort of going back to your point of the past, the present, and the future in thinking about. Well, any other last thoughts in conclusion about the holidays in general or traditions specifically?
I just think about this idea of balance that, in every one of the different parts that I talked about. I know we're talking specifically about this last part that I wrote, but in every single one of them, it's all kind of this balancing act that, you know, find joy in the holidays, but also make space for some of the sadness and the grief that can come with holidays.
Mhm,
That being somewhere kind of in the middle is the healthiest place that we can be. And
mhm,
so, not forcing ourselves to go one way or another, but
mhm,
simply being somewhere in the middle,
mhm,
that's okay.
mhm. Yeah. If we're feeling that like sadness or grief come up, still being open to small moments of joy. Or if we're
Mhm.
feeling maybe we tend to be more on the happy side, still allowing ourselves to recognize the sadness or grief as it comes up too. I love that. Yeah, somewhere in the middle, all feeling all of the emotions that's present. Um, well, thank you so much, Channing, for taking this time to talk through all four articles today, all four parts that you can, if you're watching or listening today on YouTube or social media. You can read all four on the website, landryetheridge.com. You can also schedule a consultation if you're interested in working with Channing. She does both couples and individual, amazing couples and individual therapist here in Charleston, South Carolina. Highly recommend. Love having her on staff. Very wise therapist here. So thank you so much for your time. I think these four articles are truly a gift to anybody who reads them, takes the time to sort of incorporate some of these things. and prepare for the holidays. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.